Recently, I did a video where I talked about my top 5 cars that I've owned so far. Now, obviously, if you have favourite cars, then you also have cars that are the opposite of that, my worst cars. And that is what I'm going to tell you about today. My top 5 video came about after me thinking about what car I'd really want next after the sale of my M3, and I realised that what makes a truly great car, for me at least, isn't just how it looks, sounds or goes, but also what connection you build with that car. And that connection can be for many things, such as the memories that I have with a car, how it makes you feel, etc, etc. So my worst cars may not all seem to make sense on the surface, but trust me when I say I had no issues making this list. So why 3 cars? Well, I found that I could very quickly call out 3 candidates, but beyond that it got a lot harder and I felt almost bad trying to justify even 2 more cars from their flaws or my experiences, so it is just the 3. In my top 5 video, there was possibly an unlikely mix of performance and daily driver cars, but in my bottom 3, they're all performance cars and almost all of them could be considered pretty extreme performance cars. So let's dive in. In third place is my TVR Tomorrow. I bought this car with the money I made from stripping my glorious EP82 Starlet Turbo that I built, something I regret still to this day. On paper it was perfect for me at the time. It was more grown up, it was more aspirational perhaps, it looked sensational and it sounded brutal. In reality though, this car taught me a very important lesson, and that is the difference between owning a car and affording a car. So yeah, I had the money to buy it, but I most certainly did not have the money to maintain it, regardless of any issues it may have presented, and I realised that very quickly. And let's face it, a low volume British built in Blackpool 90s car is going to present a lot of problems. So although I enjoyed some aspects of the Tomorrow, especially the changes I made to the interior and the rear end, what killed it for me was the constant fear that something was about to go very, very wrong. Every time I started it, there was a strange new smell. Smoke would appear from under the bonnet at times, other times from the exhaust, strange noises. So it just had to go, as I dreaded getting in it more and more and more. I knew it was like rolling the dice. Every journey I took, that inevitable catastrophic failure that I could not come back from was just around the corner. In second place is the most extreme car I have ever owned. Possibly the most extreme car it's possible to own. The Radical SR3 Track Sport. This car came after my amazing little Clio 172 Cup, and I was totally drawn in by how it looked. I mean, look at the thing. The performance also was the stuff of top trumps. The stats were just insane. 252 horsepower from a tuned Hayabusa engine, sequential box obviously, over 550 brake horsepower per tonne. This thing would do 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds, 0 to 100 in sub 8. It was just madness, and it was road legal. So why is it number 2? In my previous car, the Clio, I was really getting into track days and I got quite good, I thought, with my Clio. So, I thought, hey, let's up my game. And going from that car to the Radical was like going from learning to wiggle your toes to being in the lineup of Riverdance. I simply couldn't handle it and I couldn't bring what it demanded of the driver. So to put it another way, to make use of a Radical, you need testicles the size of planets. And my testicles were oh so very, very small. And that car pointed that out so quickly and so easily. So I couldn't use the performance, and that actually made the car very dangerous to drive, as the aero didn't work below say 100 miles an hour, the brakes wouldn't get hot so it didn't work, and the engine, being a bike engine, needed driving to the red line in every gear, otherwise it ran like a bag of shit. racetrack, if you weren't 100% committed and balls to the wall, it would fail. But if you were 100% committed, the aero, the brakes, everything would work and you would destroy anything and everything. But that razor's edge of not knowing if you were going to die at any moment, that was kind of difficult to live with. When you add to that just how compromised it was as a road car, I mean, how they made it road legal in the first place, I have no idea. It just became something that I couldn't use for anything. So a few examples: it would hunt camber like nothing I've driven before or since. You had to constantly wrestle with this tiny little racing steering wheel just to go in a straight line. It had no fuel gauge, it had no fuel tank breather, so it would piss fuel all over you at a petrol station. It was so low, every time you drove past a lorry there was a genuine risk of being sucked underneath the wheels. I could just go on and on. The car didn't have a chip computer, so servicing it was interesting because everything was done on hours because it's a race car. Fine on a racetrack when you use it for a season, but trying to make a note of, oh, I drove it for 20 minutes here, that means that's 20 minutes off 40 hours until I need to rebuild the engine. And oh no, wait, it's 25 hours for the dampers. Oh, what about the brake calipers? It was just nonsensical as a car, so it just had to go. So what on earth is my number one worst car in the world ever? Without a shadow of a doubt, that prize goes to my Lotus Exige S Series 2. After the Radical came the Lotus, and I thought everything I liked in my head about the Radical would be present, but none of the huge list of drawbacks. It was even me thinking I was being really smart, picking a car that had been modified a lot, thinking that that would save me money and time and be more fun. I picked the car up on a Friday night from a dodgy chap in Liverpool who left the country shortly after, which should have kind of made me think, But anyway, 2 days later, I was in Germany at the Nürburgring, lapping the ring, loving it, thinking I'd made the best decision of my life. But my Lotus wasn't a Lotus, it was a Laudi. It was the first ever, in the UK at least, engine swapped Exige from an Audi S3 8P, and that was the car's downfall. Again, on paper, it was a petrol head's dream, 450 brake horsepower in a car that weighed less than a piece of paper. It had Lotus handling, which was amazing, German reliability, and the soundtrack straight from a Group B rally stage. Problem was that the engine swap was the first of its kind, and that meant there was no R&D, there was nothing to sort of fall back on, no experience to draw on, no ironing out any kinks. It was just me left holding the pieces of a transplant that was so badly done it made the UK government's handling of COVID seem sensible. The company that built it was called Autograph Cars up in Burnley, and they closed down shortly after making this car because of all the shit work they did on all the customers' cars. I would come to the garage each and every day, and there would be a different fluid of a different colour left by the car on the floor. In 6 months, I spent just over 7 grand trying to fix the terrible job done by Autograph on fitting the engine, and it just didn't end. Imagine being on a boat that's leaking water and you put your finger in a hole and then another hole opens up somewhere else. It was like that, but worse. When I sold it, the new unlucky owner very quickly had to rebuild the entire car. The level of problems that he uncovered made it clear that I hadn't even scratched the surface. The car was actually downright dangerous. So there you have it, the bad, the worse, and the downright shocking. I hope you enjoyed this little video. Thank you for watching, and let me know about cars that you've owned that you maybe wish you hadn't, because we've all got some.